The silhouette of Katherine O'Malley emerged from the dusty horizon, her tattered dress fluttering in the autumn breeze as she stumbled toward the small town of Custer, Dakota Territory. The year was 1876, mere months after General Custer's infamous last stand, and the town that bore his name sat uneasily in a territory still reeling from conflict. Blood trickled down Katherine's temple as she clutched a small leather satchel, all that remained of her former life. The town appeared before her like a mirage, wooden buildings sprouting from the prairie as if they'd grown there naturally alongside the tall grass. Katherine blinked hard, willing her vision to clear. 3 days without proper food or water had left her delirious. The buildings wavered in the afternoon heat, and she wasn't certain whether the town was real or merely a cruel trick of her desperate mind. But the dirt beneath her feet felt solid enough, and the distant sounds of piano music from the saloon grew louder with each painful step. She focused on that music, using it as an anchor to keep herself moving forward, 1 foot in front of the other. That's all she needed to do now, 1 foot in front of the other. Just a little farther, she whispered to herself, her voice a dry rasp that barely carried past her cracked lips. Just a little farther. Her legs finally gave out at the edge of town, and she collapsed in a heap of dust and worn calico. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of worn leather boots approaching and a deep voice calling out for help. Sam Norwood had been loading supplies onto his wagon when he spotted the woman collapse at the edge of town. He'd seen desperate folks before. This was Dakota Territory after all, where the land could be as cruel as the people who sought to tame it, but something about the woman's determination caught his attention even before she fell. He dropped the sack of flour he'd been carrying and sprinted toward her fallen form, kicking up dust with each long stride. As he drew closer, he could see the dried blood on her face and the bruises that bloomed like violet shadows on her exposed skin. "Someone get Doc Miller." He shouted toward the general store where several townsfolk had gathered, watching with curious eyes. Now, Sam knelt beside the unconscious woman, carefully checking her pulse. It fluttered beneath his fingertips like a trapped bird, rapid but weak. Her skin was hot to the touch, too hot, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. "What happened to her?" Mrs. Abernathy asked as she hurried over, her usually stern face softening with concern. "Don't know," Sam replied, gently lifting the woman into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, as if she'd been hollowed out by whatever hardship had driven her to their town. But she needs help, and she needs it fast. Dr. Miller's office was 3 buildings down, a modest structure with a shingle that proclaimed medical services in faded paint. Sam kicked the door open, startling the elderly doctor who had been organizing his medical supplies. "Good Lord, Norwood," the doctor exclaimed, adjusting his spectacles. "You could knock like a civilized." His words died when he saw the battered woman in Sam's arms. "Put her on the table." "Gently now." Sam laid her down with a tenderness that surprised even himself. Something about her stirred protective instincts he'd thought long buried after his years on the frontier. "Found her at the edge of town," he explained as the doctor began examining her. "Collapsed right in front of me." Dr. Miller's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking her injuries with gentle touches. "Dehydration, malnutrition," he muttered, then his expression darkened as he examined the marks on her wrists and neck. "And these aren't from falling off a horse. Someone did this to her." Sam's jaw tightened. He'd seen the marks too, the distinctive pattern of fingers pressed too hard into flesh, the rope burns on her wrists. His hand instinctively moved to the revolver on his hip, though the perpetrator was nowhere in sight. "Will she live?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. The doctor nodded slowly. "If we get some fluids in her and tend to these wounds, yes, but the recovery won't be just physical, I reckon, not with injuries like these." Sam nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. He'd seen that haunted look before, in the eyes of people who'd survived things no person should have to endure. "I'll stay with her," he said, pulling up a chair. Dr. Miller raised an eyebrow. "Don't you have a ranch to run, Norwood? Jim can handle things for a spell." Sam settled into the chair, removing his hat and placing it on his knee. Someone should be here when she wakes, someone other than a stranger with medical instruments. The doctor seemed about to argue, then thought better of it. He knew Sam Norwood well enough to recognize when the rancher had set his mind to something. Besides, the doctor had other patients to see, and having someone watch over the woman would be helpful. Fine, he conceded. But don't let her move too much when she wakes, and get her to drink this. He handed Sam a glass of water with a few drops of medicine mixed in. It'll help with the pain. Sam nodded, his eyes never leaving the woman's face. Even battered and unconscious, there was a strength in her features that commanded respect. Hours passed as Sam maintained his vigil. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows through the office window. He'd sent word to his ranch that he wouldn't be back until morning, and now there was nothing to do but wait. As twilight settled over Custer, Katherine stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened fully, revealing eyes the color of a summer storm gray with flecks of blue. For a moment they were clear and alert, then panic set in. She bolted upright, a cry of alarm tearing from her throat. "Easy," Sam said, keeping his distance but raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe now. You're in Custer, Dakota Territory." Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the medical supplies, the doctor's desk, and finally landing on Sam himself. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching her tattered dress close. "Who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw with thirst and fear. "Name's Samuel Norwood. Most folks call me Sam. I found you at the edge of town and brought you to the doctor." He slowly reached for the glass of water, moving deliberately so as not to startle her further. "You should drink something." Katherine eyed the glass suspiciously, her gaze shifting between it and the man offering it. He didn't look like her husband. This man's eyes were kind, his movements careful. But she'd been fooled before. "It's just water," Sam assured her. "With a bit of medicine for the pain, doctor's orders." Thirst eventually overcame caution. She accepted the glass with trembling hands and drank greedily, water spilling down her chin in her haste. "Slow down now," Sam advised gently. "Too much too fast will make you sick." She lowered the glass, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice slightly stronger. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated, considering whether to give a false name. But what was the point? If he had found her, others might too. "Katherine," she finally said. "Katherine O'Malley." Sam nodded, offering a small smile. "Well, Miss O'Malley, you gave us quite a scare collapsing like that." "I'm sorry for the trouble," she said automatically, the words a reflex from years of apologizing for her existence. "No trouble," Sam replied, his brow furrowing at her response. "But if you don't mind my asking, what brought you to Custer in such a state?" Katherine's hand moved unconsciously to her bruised neck, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I was running." Sam didn't press for details. The marks on her body told enough of the story. "Well, you can rest here for now. Doc Miller says you need food and rest." As if summoned by his name, the doctor entered the office, looking pleased to see his patient awake. "Ah, good. How are you feeling, miss?" "I've been better," Katherine admitted, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dr. Miller checked her pulse and examined her pupils. "You're dehydrated and malnourished, and those wounds need proper cleaning, but you'll recover with rest and care." "I don't have money to pay you," Katherine said, anxiety creeping into her voice. "Not yet, but I can work. We can worry about that later," the doctor interrupted kindly. "For now, you need to heal." Sam stood, placing his hat back on his head. "Doc, I'll bring some food from the hotel. She needs something substantial." Before either could respond, he was out the door, striding purposefully toward the hotel restaurant across the street. The cool evening air cleared his head, giving him a moment to process his jumbled thoughts. Something about Katherine O'Malley had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the determination it must have taken for her to reach their town in such a condition, or maybe it was the flash of strength he'd seen beneath her fear. Whatever it was, he knew he couldn't simply walk away. The hotel restaurant was busy with the dinner crowd, but Sam managed to persuade the cook to prepare a tray with broth, bread, and tea. As he waited, Sheriff Taylor entered, nodding a greeting before making his way over. "Heard you found a woman half dead at the edge of town," the sheriff said without preamble. Any idea where she came from? She says her name's Katherine O'Malley, Sam replied. That's about all I know. She was running from something or someone. The sheriff's expression darkened. Or someone. Marks on her? Sam nodded grimly. I'll ask around, see if anyone's heard of her. Could be a husband looking for her. The sheriff adjusted his gun belt. Sometimes these domestic matters are complicated. If it's a husband who did that to her, Sam said quietly, he'd best not show his face around me. The sheriff gave him a measured look. Let the law handle it, Norwood. That's what I'm here for. Sam didn't reply. The cook arrived with the tray of food, and he took it with a nod of thanks. As he turned to leave, the sheriff called after him, Sam, I mean it, don't get too involved. You don't know her story. I know enough, Sam replied, pushing through the door with his shoulder. When he returned to the doctor's office, Katherine was sitting up, looking marginally better after having her wounds cleaned and bandaged. Dr. Miller had given her a faded dress from the collection of donated clothing he kept for emergencies. Brought you some food, Sam said, setting the tray before her. Nothing fancy, but it'll help you get your strength back. Katherine looked at the simple meal as if it were a feast. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know why you're being so kind to a stranger. Sam sat back down, watching as she carefully began to eat the broth. Folks help each other out here. It's how we survive. Dr. Miller cleared his throat. Miss O'Malley needs a place to stay while she recovers. The clinic isn't suitable for extended rest. The hotel has rooms, Sam suggested. Katherine's face fell. I told you I don't have money. I can cover it, Sam offered without hesitation. Until you're back on your feet. Her spoon clattered against the bowl. I won't accept charity. I can work for my keep. Dr. Miller and Sam exchanged glances. You're in no condition to work, the doctor said firmly. What about my place? Sam suggested after a moment of thought. I've got a spare room at the ranch house. My housekeeper, Mrs. Dempsey, is there most days. You'd have someone looking after you, and when you're stronger, if you still want to work, we always need help around the ranch. Katherine looked at him suspiciously. Why would you offer your home to a stranger? Because everyone deserves a safe place to heal, Sam replied simply. And like I said, we could use the help once you're well. She studied his face, searching for deceit or ulterior motives. Finding none, she finally nodded. Until I'm well enough to move on. Dr. Miller looked relieved. That settles it then, but I want her to stay here tonight for observation. She can go to the ranch tomorrow if there are no complications. Sam nodded, standing once more. I'll come by in the morning with the wagon. He paused, then added, No one will hurt you here, Miss O'Malley. You have my word on that. For the first time, a genuine smile, small but real, touched Katherine's lips. Thank you, Mr. Norwood. As Sam left the doctor's office, his mind was already racing with preparations. He'd need to let Mrs. Dempsey know they'd have a guest, make sure the spare room was properly prepared, and perhaps ask her to find some suitable clothing for Katherine. He hadn't planned on bringing a battered woman back to his ranch when he'd ridden into town that morning. But then again, the best things in life were rarely planned. And something told him that Katherine O'Malley might just be one of those unexpected blessings if she'd allow herself to be. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that reminded everyone winter was coming but wasn't quite ready to arrive. Sam drove his wagon into town early, stopping first at the general store to purchase a few necessities for Katherine. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, raised an eyebrow at his selections: a modest nightgown, a brush, some hairpins, and a bar of lavender soap. For our guest, Sam explained before she could comment. The woman Doc Miller's treating. Ah, Mrs. Peterson nodded, wrapping the items in brown paper. Folks are talking about her. Poor thing looked half dead when you carried her in. People should mind their own business, Sam said, not unkindly but firmly. In a town this size, that's asking for miracles. She handed him the package. But don't you worry. I'll set them straight if I hear any nonsense. That woman needs kindness, not gossip. Sam tipped his hat in appreciation and headed to the doctor's office. He found Katherine awake and sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the town with wary interest. The bruises on her face had deepened to a dark purple, standing out starkly against her pale skin, but her eyes were clearer today. "Morning," Sam greeted, setting the package on the doctor's desk. "Brought you a few things you might need." Katherine turned from the window, surprise evident on her face. "You came back." "Said I would, didn't I?" He shifted, suddenly feeling awkward under her scrutiny. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she admitted. "The doctor says I can leave as long as I take it easy." "Doctor." Miller emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She's on the mend but needs rest and good food. The bruising will take time to fade, and those ribs need at least 6 weeks to heal properly." "Ribs?" Sam questioned, his jaw tightening. "2 broken, 3 bruised," the doctor confirmed. "Old injuries starting to heal." Katherine stared at the floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We'll make sure she rests," Sam promised, his voice gentle despite the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Not at her, never at her, but at whoever had treated her so cruelly. The ride to the Norwood ranch was mostly silent. Katherine sat beside Sam on the wagon seat, the package of new items clutched in her lap like a shield. She kept her eyes on the horizon, taking in the vast expanse of prairie stretching out around them. "It's beautiful," she finally said as they crested a small rise, revealing the rolling grassland beyond. "So open." "That it is," Sam agreed. "Takes some getting used to if you're from back east." "All this sky can make a person feel mighty small." "I like it," Katherine said quietly. "Makes my problems seem smaller too." Sam glanced at her, noting the way the sun highlighted the auburn tones in her brown hair. Despite everything, there was a resilience to her that he admired. "Ranch is just over that next ridge. Not much to look at, but it's home." The Norwood Ranch came into view, a modest but well-maintained spread with a main house, a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, black dots against the golden prairie grass. It wasn't the biggest ranch in the territory, but it was thriving under Sam's careful management. As they approached, a plump woman in her 50s emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Dempsey had been with the Norwood family since before Sam's parents passed, and she ran the household with efficient kindness. "So this is our guest," she said as Sam helped Katherine down from the wagon. Her assessing gaze took in Katherine's bruised face and thin frame, but her expression remained warmly neutral. "I'm Agnes Dempsey, dear. You must be exhausted from the ride. Come inside, I've prepared your room and there's stew simmering for lunch." Katherine seemed overwhelmed by the welcome, managing only a quiet thank you as she was ushered inside. The house was modest but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and simple decorations. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, warding off the autumn chill. "Your room is this way, Mrs. Dempsey said, leading Katherine down a short hallway. "Used to be Sam's sister's before she married and moved to Oregon. I've aired it out and put fresh linens on the bed." The room was small but pleasant, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair by the window that overlooked the eastern pasture. A patchwork quilt in shades of blue and green covered the bed, and wildflowers stood in a jar on the dresser. "It's lovely," Katherine said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "I don't know how to thank you both." "Rest is thanks enough," Mrs. Dempsey said firmly. "Now I'll leave you to settle in. There's water in the pitcher if you'd like to freshen up. Lunch will be ready in about an hour." Left alone, Katherine sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the past days catching up with her. She was safe for now at least, but the future remained uncertain. She had no money, nowhere to go, and a husband who would not simply let her disappear. She opened the package Sam had brought, running her fingers over the simple nightgown and touching the lavender soap to her nose. Such small kindnesses, yet they brought tears to her eyes. How long had it been since anyone had shown her consideration without expecting something in return? Outside, Sam led his horses to the barn, his mind troubled. Jim Thompson, his foreman, approached as he was unhitching the team. "Got her settled in?" Jim asked, helping with the harness. Sam nodded. "She's with Mrs. Dempsey now." "Sheriff rode out while you were gone," Jim said, keeping his voice low. "Asking about her, said her husband might come looking." Sam's hands stilled on the leather straps. "What did you tell him?" that I'd pass the message along. Jim eyed his boss carefully. You're getting yourself into something complicated, Sam. Wouldn't be the first time. Sam resumed his work, his movements more forceful than necessary. This is different, Jim persisted. A woman running from her husband, that's messy business. Sam turned to face his foreman, his expression resolute. You saw her face, Jim, saw how she could barely walk. If that's her husband's doing, he's no man at all. Jim sighed, recognizing the determined set of Sam's jaw. Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. Always am, Sam replied, though they both knew it wasn't strictly true. Sam Norwood had a reputation for doing what he thought was right, regardless of the consequences. The next few days established a quiet routine. Katherine spent most of her time resting in her room or sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. Mrs. Dempsey kept her well fed, clucking with satisfaction as Katherine's appetite improved and a hint of color returned to her cheeks. Sam was often busy with ranch work, but he made time to check on her, sometimes bringing her books from his modest library or simply sitting with her in companionable silence as the sun set over the prairie. On the fourth day, Katherine ventured to the kitchen where Mrs. Dempsey was kneading dough for bread. Can I help with anything? Katherine asked hesitantly. Mrs. Dempsey looked up, flour dusting her forearms. Should you be up and about? I'm going stir-crazy just sitting, Katherine admitted, and I'd like to earn my keep even in some small way. The older woman studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a chair at the table. You can sit and shell these peas for me, but the minute you start looking tired, you're back to resting. Katherine gratefully took the task, finding comfort in the repetitive motion of shelling peas. The kitchen was warm and smelled of yeast and spices, so different from the tense atmosphere of her husband's house, where she'd always cooked with one eye on the clock, terrified of having dinner late. He's a good man, you know, Mrs. Dempsey said after a while, her hands never stopping their rhythmic kneading. Mr. Norwood, Katherine kept her eyes on her task, known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His parents built this place from nothing, and when the fever took them both in '68, Sam stepped up at just 20 years old. Never complained, just did what needed doing. Katherine glanced out the window where she could see Sam in the distance, working with a young colt in the corral. Why are you telling me this? Because I see how you flinch when he comes near, Mrs. Dempsey said bluntly but kindly. And I understand why. But Sam Norwood never raised his hand to anyone who didn't deserve it, and certainly never to a woman. Katherine's hands stilled over the peas. I don't mean to offend him. He's not offended, dear. He understands more than you might think. Mrs. Dempsey shaped the dough into a loaf and placed it in a pan to rise. His sister Elizabeth, the one whose room you're in, she married a man who seemed charming at first. By the time they discovered his true nature, she was already with child and halfway to Oregon. What happened? Katherine asked, drawn into the story despite herself. Sam rode out there the minute he got her letter. Brought her back here until the baby was born, then helped her start fresh in Kansas City. She's remarried now, to a good man who treats her and the child like treasures. Mrs. Dempsey wiped her hands on her apron. So you see, he knows something about men who hurt women. Katherine absorbed this information silently, her eyes drawn back to the window where Sam was now patting the young horse's neck, his movements gentle despite his strength. That evening, when Sam came to check on her before turning in, Katherine didn't tense when he sat beside her on the porch. Stars are clear tonight, he commented, looking up at the vast canopy of the night sky. Good sign for tomorrow's weather. Mrs. Dempsey told me about your sister today, Katherine said, gathering her courage. About what you did for her. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Beth's happy now. That's what matters. You risked a lot going after her like that. He shrugged, his profile strong in the moonlight. She's family, no risk too great for family. And I'm not family, Katherine said softly, yet you're risking just as much for me. Sam turned to look at her then, his expression serious. Maybe not family, but you're under my roof now. That means something where I come from. My husband won't see it that way, she warned. Thomas is persistent and connected. He's a banker in Rapid City. Thomas O'Malley, Sam said, testing the name. Well, Mr. O'Malley will find the people of Custer aren't easily intimidated, connections or no. Katherine wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the blanket. You don't know him, what he's capable of. And he doesn't know me, Sam replied simply, or what I'm capable of. The confidence in his voice should have been reassuring, but Katherine had heard such promises before. Her brother had sworn to protect her, but Thomas had ruined him with false accusations of embezzlement. Her friend had offered shelter only to turn her away when Thomas threatened her family. I should leave, Katherine said, the words catching in her throat, before I bring trouble to your door. Running didn't work so well last time, Sam pointed out gently. And you're still healing. I'm damaged beyond repair, Katherine whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside her. No amount of healing will change that. Sam was quiet for so long that Katherine thought he might agree with her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and sure. Then we'll heal together, he said simply. Piece by piece, day by day. Katherine looked at him then, really looked at him, at the quiet determination in his eyes, the steadiness of his presence beside her. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest stirring of hope. I don't know if I can believe that's possible, she admitted. You don't have to believe it yet, Sam replied. I'll believe enough for both of us until you're ready. Under the vast Dakota sky, something fragile and new took root between them, not quite trust, but the possibility of it. For tonight, that was enough. The next morning brought the first snow of the season, light flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground but heralded the coming winter. Katherine stood at the window of her room, watching the transformation of the landscape with quiet wonder. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Mrs. Dempsey entered with a bundle of clothing in her arms. Thought these might fit you, she said, laying the items on the bed. Some of Elizabeth's things she left behind, nothing fancy but practical for ranch life. Katherine ran her fingers over the simple dresses and skirts, touched by the gesture. Thank you, I'll take good care of them. They're yours now, dear, no need to return them. Mrs. Dempsey paused at the door. Sam's riding into town today, asked if there's anything you need. Katherine hesitated, then reached for the small leather satchel she'd carried with her from Rapid City. From inside, she withdrew a folded letter. Could you ask him to post this? It's to my brother in St. Louis. He should know I'm safe. Mrs. Dempsey took the letter with a nod. I'll tell him. Now come down for breakfast when you're dressed. You're still too thin by half. Left alone, Katherine changed into one of the dresses, a simple blue calico that had been altered to fit her smaller frame. The sleeves covered the fading bruises on her arms, and though it was a bit loose around the waist, it was the first time in days she'd felt properly clothed. Downstairs, the kitchen was warm and inviting. Sam was already seated at the table, a cup of coffee steaming before him. He looked up when Katherine entered, and something in his expression made her heart skip. Morning, he said, standing as she approached the table. That dress suits you? Katherine felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Mrs. Dempsey's kindness, are you really going to town today? Need to check on some supplies, Sam confirmed, retaking his seat as Katherine sat across from him. Mrs. Dempsey mentioned you have a letter to post to my brother, Katherine explained as Mrs. Dempsey placed a plate of eggs and biscuits before her. He must be worried sick. You're close then? Sam asked, watching as she took a small bite of food. We were, Katherine said, her expression clouding. Before Thomas. He tried to warn me, but I was too blinded by Thomas's charm to listen. By the time I realized the truth, Thomas had already ruined Michael's reputation and driven him from Rapid City. Your husband sounds like a real piece of work, Sam commented, his tone deceptively mild despite the anger simmering beneath. He's very good at appearing to be exactly what people want him to be, Katherine said, pushing her food around the plate. Charming, generous, respected. No one would believe what he's capable of behind closed doors. I believe you, Sam said simply, meeting her gaze steadily. And so will anyone who matters. The certainty in his voice warmed something long cold within Katherine. She had grown so accustomed to doubting her own perceptions, to being told her memories and experiences weren't real, that having someone believe her without question felt like a gift beyond price. Thank you, she said softly. Sam finished his coffee and stood. I should be back by sundown. Jim and the boys will be around if you need anything." As he donned his coat and hat, Katherine found herself wishing he didn't have to go. In just a few short days, his presence had become a comfort, a constant she hadn't realized she'd come to rely on. "Be careful," she said as he reached for the door. He turned back, a half-smile playing at his lips. "Always am." The ride into town gave Sam time to think, the steady rhythm of his horses' hooves a familiar background to his thoughts. Katherine O'Malley had gotten under his skin in a way no woman had before. It wasn't just her beauty, though she had plenty of that despite the fading bruises. It was her strength, the quiet determination that had carried her, injured and alone, to the edge of their town. In Custer, Sam completed his errands, efficiently ordering supplies, checking in with the blacksmith about horseshoes, and finally, posting Katherine's letter at the general store. "That woman still staying out at your place?" Sheriff Taylor asked, approaching as Sam exited the store. "She is," Sam confirmed, his tone neutral. The sheriff sighed, rubbing his mustache. "Got a telegram yesterday from a banker in Rapid City. Says his wife's run off, might be heading this way. Described her pretty accurate." "That's so." Sam maintained his casual stance, but tension crept up his spine. "Says she's unstable, prone to making up stories, wants her returned for her own safety." The sheriff studied Sam's face. "Sound familiar? Doesn't sound like anyone I know," Sam replied evenly. "The woman at my ranch is recovering from injuries that weren't self-inflicted." "I'm not saying I believe him," the sheriff clarified, "just giving you a heads up. Man like that, with money and connections, he won't stop with a telegram." "I appreciate the warning," Sam said, mounting his horse. "But Katherine O'Malley is welcome at my ranch for as long as she chooses to stay. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The sheriff shook his head. "Just be careful, Norwood. This could get messy." "Life usually is," Sam replied, tipping his hat before turning his horse toward home. He rode faster on the return journey, an unexplained urgency driving him. The conversation with the sheriff had unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. If Thomas O'Malley was already searching for Katherine, it wouldn't be long before he arrived in person. The ranch came into view just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in vivid strokes of orange and pink. As Sam approached, he spotted Katherine sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. The sight of her eased something tight in his chest. "You're back early," she said as he dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post. "Finished sooner than expected," he replied, joining her on the porch. "Letters posted, should reach your brother in a week or so." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "You seem troubled." Sam considered deflecting, then thought better of it. Katherine had endured enough lies in her life. "Sheriff received a telegram from Rapid City." Her face paled, fingers clutching the shawl tighter. "Thomas. He's looking for you," Sam confirmed, spinning quite a tale about your state of mind. A bitter laugh escaped her. "Of course he is. It's his favorite tactic, making everyone believe I'm unstable, imagining things." She met Sam's gaze. "Do you think the sheriff believed him? Taylor's a good man, skeptical by nature, but your husband's a banker with influence, and that carries weight." Sam reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away before covering her hand with his. "But it doesn't matter what the sheriff believes. I know the truth." Katherine's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Sam said firmly. "I know you're brave and resilient. I know you've survived things that would break most people, and I know I won't let him hurt you again." A single tear spilled over, tracking down her cheek. "I shouldn't have come here. I've put you all in danger." "You came here because you were fighting to survive," Sam corrected gently. "And there's not a person on this ranch who wouldn't stand with you in that fight." Katherine stared at their joined hands, his large and calloused from years of ranch work, her smaller but marked with her own hardships. "Why?" she asked, the question containing multitudes. "Why help her? Why risk so much? Why care?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Sam answered simply. Then, after a pause, "And because I've come to care what happens to you, Katherine O'Malley." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. In another life, it might have been the beginning of something sweet and uncomplicated, a courtship, perhaps, with all the traditional steps. But their reality was far more complex, shadowed by the threat of Thomas O'Malley and the wounds, both visible and invisible, that Katherine still carried. "I don't know if I can offer anything in return," Katherine whispered, the words clearly costing her. "I'm not sure I even remember how to feel normal things anymore." "I'm not asking for anything in return," Sam assured her, "just that you stay and heal however long that takes." In the gathering dusk, with the first stars beginning to appear overhead, Katherine allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that such healing might be possible. The next week passed in relative calm. Katherine grew stronger daily, helping Mrs. Dempsey with household tasks, and even venturing to the garden to harvest the last of the autumn vegetables before the hard frosts came. The constant work and fresh air brought color to her cheeks and a steadiness to her hands that had been absent before. Sam found himself seeking her company whenever ranch duties allowed, drawn to her quiet resilience and the rare smile that transformed her face when something delighted her. He showed her his favorite places on the ranch, the hilltop with views clear to the distant mountains, the small creek where willows dipped their branches in the water, the old oak tree his father had planted the year Sam was born. Katherine soaked in these moments like a parched garden receiving rain, each small kindness and consideration helping to rebuild what years with Thomas had systematically destroyed. She began to sleep through the night without nightmares, to speak without first calculating the potential reaction to her words, to exist in her body without constant fear. But the shadow of Thomas O'Malley still loomed. Each trip to town brought news of more inquiries, more pressure from Rapid City. The banker was offering a reward now for information about his beloved but troubled wife. "He won't give up," Katherine told Sam one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. Mrs. Dempsey had retired early, leaving them alone in the comfortable main room of the ranch house. "He sees me as his possession, something he owns." "You're not property," Sam said firmly, stoking the fire with more force than necessary, "no matter what he thinks." "In the eyes of the law, a wife has few rights," Katherine reminded him bitterly. "Especially when her husband is respected and influential." Sam set aside the poker, turning to face her fully. "What would make you truly free of him? Legally, I mean." Katherine considered the question. "Divorce is nearly impossible unless I can prove extreme cruelty, and it would be his word against mine. Most of the bruises have healed now." "And if he were to divorce you," Sam pressed, "on what grounds could he do that? Abandonment, perhaps, or—" She trailed off, understanding dawning in her eyes. "If he believed I had been unfaithful." Sam nodded slowly. "It might give him a way to save face. Better to be the wronged husband than the abandoned one. You're suggesting we make him believe I've—" Katherine couldn't finish the sentence, a blush staining her cheeks. "I'm suggesting we give him an easy way out," Sam clarified. "A story he can tell his society friends that preserves his pride while giving you your freedom." Katherine studied the fire, considering the idea. It might work. "Thomas values his reputation above all else, but it would mean ruining yours as well. People would believe you were involved with a married woman." Sam shrugged. "People in these parts already think I'm odd for not remarrying after Caroline passed. One more rumor won't hurt me." "Caroline?" Katherine asked softly. "My wife," Sam explained, his expression softening with old grief. "Lost her and our child in childbirth 6 years ago." "I'm so sorry," Katherine said, reaching out impulsively to touch his hand. "I didn't know." "No reason you should," Sam replied, turning his hand to gently hold hers. "It was a long time ago." "Is that why you understand?" Katherine asked. "About healing from things that seem beyond repair." Sam's thumb traced small circles on her palm, the gesture unconsciously intimate. "Partly. Though what you've endured is different. Pain is pain," Katherine said quietly, "whether it comes from loss or cruelty." They sat in silence for a moment, connected by their joined hands and shared understanding of suffering. "If we do this," Katherine finally said, "use this strategy against Thomas, it needs to be convincing. He's shrewd enough to see through a weak performance." "Meaning?" Sam asked, though he suspected he knew where she was leading. "We'd need to be seen together in town, acting close." perhaps even openly affectionate. Catherine's voice remained steady, but her pulse quickened beneath Sam's fingers. It would have to appear that I left Thomas for you, not just to escape him. Sam studied her face in the firelight, noting the determination there despite her obvious nervousness. Are you certain you'd be comfortable with that, given everything you've been through with you? Katherine met his gaze directly. Yes, I trust you, Sam. 3 simple words, yet they carried the weight of worlds. Sam understood what it must have cost her to say them, how precious and fragile that trust must be after everything Thomas had done to destroy it. Then we'll try, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But the moment it becomes too much for you, we stop, no questions asked. Katherine nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you. As the fire crackled between them, neither moved to break their connected hands, finding comfort in this small point of contact as they contemplated the challenge ahead. Their plan was set in motion the following Sunday. Church in Custer was a social event as much as a religious one, with nearly the entire town gathering for the service and lingering afterward to exchange news and gossip. If they wanted rumors to spread, there was no better place to start. Sam drove Katherine into town in his best wagon, both of them dressed in their Sunday finest. Katherine wore a forest green dress that Mrs. Dempsey had altered for her hair swept up in a simple but elegant style that emphasized the graceful line of her neck. The bruises had faded enough to be concealed with powder, and to casual observers, she appeared merely a handsome woman accompanying a respected rancher to church. They arrived deliberately late, ensuring all eyes were on them as they entered the small church together. Sam kept a protective hand at the small of Katherine's back, guiding her to a pew near the middle of the congregation. Mrs. Peterson from the general store raised an eyebrow at the pair, leaning to whisper to her neighbor. Sheriff Taylor, seated near the front, turned to observe them with a thoughtful frown before facing forward again. Throughout the service, Sam maintained a respectful distance, but his attentiveness was clear to anyone watching the way he shared his hymnal with Katherine, how his arm brushed against hers as they stood for prayers, the gentle smile he offered when she glanced his way. For Katherine, the performance required less acting than she had anticipated. There was genuine comfort in Sam's presence, real warmth in the smiles they exchanged. If her heart beat a little faster when his hand accidentally brushed hers, she attributed it to nervousness about their plan, not any deeper feeling. After the service, they lingered on the church steps, speaking with neighbors and accepting invitations to upcoming social events with every appearance of a couple established in their relationship. People are certainly noticing, Katherine murmured as they finally made their way toward the wagon. That's the idea, Sam replied, helping her up to the seat. As he joined her, he added in a lower voice, You're doing wonderfully. Are you all right? Katherine nodded, surprised to realize it was true. It's strange, but I feel protected, even with all these eyes on us. Sam's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that made something flutter in Katherine's chest. Good, that's how it should be. They completed their performance with lunch at the hotel restaurant, where Sam pulled out Katherine's chair and leaned close to speak with her, his hand occasionally covering hers on the table. By the time they left town, there was little doubt in anyone's mind that Katherine O'Malley and Sam Norwood were more than merely rancher and guest. That should give the gossips something to chew on, Sam commented as they drove back to the ranch, the tension of their public performance easing now that they were alone. You think word will reach Thomas? Katherine asked, watching the landscape roll by. If not from today, then soon enough, Sam assured her. Small towns have long memories and faster telegraphs. Katherine nodded, falling silent as she contemplated what would happen when Thomas inevitably learned of her apparent relationship with Sam. Would he rage, threaten? Or would he, as they hoped, decide that divorcing an unfaithful wife was preferable to admitting she had fled his abuse? What are you thinking? Sam asked, noticing her pensive expression. That I'm tired of living my life in reaction to Thomas, she admitted. Even now, planning this deception, he's still controlling what I do, Sam considered this. You're right, but sometimes you have to play the game one last time to win your freedom. And then what? Katherine asked, the question slipping out before she could reconsider. And then, Sam said gently, you get to decide what you want without fear, without looking over your shoulder. That sounds like a dream, Katherine whispered, barely audible over the creak of the wagon wheels. It doesn't have to be, Sam replied. I've seen people rebuild their lives from worse. My sister did it. You can too. Katherine studied his profile against the afternoon sky, struck by the unwavering faith this man had in her, strength of faith she was only beginning to find in herself. Something warm and unfamiliar expanded in her chest, and she recognized with a start that it might be hope. The following days brought subtle changes to life at the Norwood ranch. Mrs. Dempsey noticed the shift, first the lingering glances between Sam and Katherine when they thought no one was looking, the way their hands would brush when passing items at the dinner table, the soft laughter they shared on evening walks that had become a nightly ritual. Those two aren't just pretending anymore, she confided to Jim Thompson as they watched Sam teaching Katherine to ride in the corral, his hands steady on her waist as he helped her mount. Been thinking the same, Jim agreed. Boss hasn't looked at anyone that way since Caroline. She's still married, Mrs. Dempsey reminded him with a frown. That banker fellow hasn't given up. Matter of time, Jim said confidently. Man like that won't want the scandal once he hears the rumors. Inside the corral, Katherine was gaining confidence on horseback, her initial fear giving way to enjoyment as she guided the gentle mare around the enclosure. You're a natural, Sam called from the center of the corral. Try turning her toward me now, gentle pressure with your right leg. Katherine followed his instructions, beaming with pride when the horse responded to her cues. I never thought I'd enjoy this so much, she admitted as she brought the mare to a stop beside him. Thomas always said I was too nervous for riding. Thomas was wrong about a lot of things, Sam replied, reaching up to help her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Katherine found herself reluctant to step away. Thank you for teaching me, she said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. My pleasure, Sam replied, his voice lower than usual. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips before he cleared his throat and stepped back. We should get back. Mrs. Dempsey will have dinner ready soon. Katherine nodded, unable to identify the emotion that fluttered in her chest. Disappointment. Relief. Both seemed equally possible as they led the horse back to the barn in companionable silence. That night, Katherine lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, replaying the moment in the corral. Had Sam almost kissed her? Would she have welcomed it if he had? The questions circled in her mind, impossible to answer. It had been so long since she'd felt anything resembling desire. Thomas had killed that part of her efficiently in the early years of their marriage, transforming what should have been intimate and loving into something painful and degrading. The idea that such feelings might be awakening again both thrilled and terrified her. Across the hall, Sam was similarly sleepless, berating himself for the lapse in control. Katherine was vulnerable, still healing, still legally tied to another man. The last thing she needed was him complicating matters with his growing feelings for her. Yet he couldn't deny those feelings existed. What had begun as compassion and a desire to protect had evolved into something deeper: admiration for her courage, delight in her increasingly frequent smiles, and yes, a physical attraction that became harder to ignore with each passing day. Get a grip, Norwood, he muttered to the darkness. She deserves better than your confusion. The next day brought an unexpected development. Sam was checking fences in the north pasture when Jim rode out to find him, his expression grim. Rider coming, he announced without preamble. Well-dressed, city type, asking for the ranch by name. Sam's stomach tightened. O'Malley, Jim shrugged, didn't give a name, just said he had business with the owner. Where's Katherine? Sam asked, already turning his horse toward the ranch house. With Mrs. Dempsey canning preserves. I didn't say anything to alarm them. Sam nodded his approval. Good, let's not borrow trouble until we know for certain. He spurred his horse into a gallop, anxiety driving him faster than was strictly safe over the uneven ground. By the time they reached the ranch yard, the rider had arrived, a lean man in an expensive suit that looked out of place against the rugged backdrop of the ranch. He sat stiffly on a hired horse, looking uncomfortable and irritable. It wasn't Thomas O'Malley. Mr. Norwood. The stranger inquired as Sam dismounted. "That's me," Sam confirmed, sizing up the visitor. "What can I do for you?" "My name is Edward Callahan. I represent the Dakota Territory Banking Association." The man reached into his jacket and produced a letter. "I have correspondence regarding one of our members, Thomas O'Malley of Rapid City." Sam accepted the letter without opening it. "Why deliver this personally? Mail works just fine out here." Callahan's thin lips curved in what might generously be called a smile. "Mr. O'Malley was most insistent that this matter receive immediate attention. He's a valued member of our association." "I bet he is," Sam replied dryly. "Well, you've delivered your letter. Can I offer you water for your horse before you head back?" Callahan glanced around the ranch with thinly veiled disdain. "No, thank you. I'll be staying in town awaiting your response. Mr. O'Malley expects an answer within 3 days." "Does he now?" Sam's tone hardened. "Well, Mr. Callahan, you can tell O'Malley that I'll respond when I'm good and ready, not when he demands it." The banker's representative stiffened. "I would advise against antagonizing Mr. O'Malley. He has considerable influence." "So folks keep telling me," Sam said, unimpressed. "Safe travels back to town, Mr. Callahan." The man hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but eventually turned his horse and rode away. Sam waited until he was well out of sight before opening the letter. The contents were much as he expected: formal, threatening language demanding the immediate return of Katherine to her rightful place with her husband. O'Malley claimed his wife was mentally unstable and in need of professional care, which he was generously willing to provide despite her betrayal. Should Sam refuse to cooperate, legal action would follow, along with public exposure of their immoral relationship. The letter concluded with an offer: if Sam would facilitate Katherine's return, O'Malley would ensure no charges of kidnapping or moral corruption were filed against him. A generous sum was mentioned as compensation for any inconvenience. Sam's hand tightened on the paper, crumpling it slightly. The cold calculation behind the words, the assumption that Katherine could be bought and sold like cattle, the thinly veiled threats all confirmed everything Katherine had told him about her husband. He found her in the kitchen as expected, helping Mrs. Dempsey seal jars of apple preserves. The domestic scene, with Katherine's hair tied back in a simple kerchief and a smudge of cinnamon on her cheek, struck him with unexpected force. This was where she belonged: safe, purposeful, respected. "Sam," Katherine looked up, her smile fading as she registered his expression. "What's wrong?" He hesitated, glancing at Mrs. Dempsey, who immediately understood. "I'll just check on those pies in the back oven," the housekeeper said discreetly, wiping her hands and disappearing into the pantry. Sam placed the letter on the table. "This came for me from your husband." Katherine went still, her eyes fixed on the paper as if it might bite. "He found me." "It was inevitable," Sam said gently, "but you don't have to read it if you don't want to." She shook her head, reaching for the letter with determined fingers. "No, I need to know what he's saying." Sam watched as she read, noting the way her shoulders tensed and her breathing quickened with each paragraph. When she finished, she carefully folded the letter and placed it back on the table. "He's offering you money," she said, her voice flat, "to return me like lost property." "I'm not taking his money," Sam stated firmly, "and I'm certainly not sending you back to him." Katherine looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He'll ruin you. He's done it to others who tried to help me." "Let him try," Sam replied, the quiet certainty in his voice more powerful than any shouted defiance. "I've weathered worse storms than Thomas O'Malley." "What will you do?" Katherine asked. Sam considered for a moment. "First, I'm going to speak with the sheriff and Judge Wilson. Make sure they hear our side before O'Malley can spin more tales. Then I'll write a response that makes it very clear you're under my protection by your own choice." "He won't accept that," Katherine warned. "He'll come himself next." I'm counting on it, Sam said grimly. Better to face him directly than play these games from a distance. Catherine's face paled. No, Sam, you don't understand how dangerous he can be. He doesn't fight fair. Neither do I when it matters, Sam replied, his expression softening as he reached for her hand across the table. Katherine, I promised you'd be safe here, and I meant it. Will you trust me a little longer? She studied his face, searching for any hint of deception or bravado. Finding none, she finally nodded. I trust you. Good. He squeezed her hand gently. Then let's finish these preserves. No sense letting good apples go to waste over Thomas O'Malley. The weak joke earned a small smile, and together they called Mrs. Dempsey back to continue their work. But the shadow of Thomas O'Malley's letter hung over the ranch like an approaching storm. True to his word, Sam rode into town the next day to speak with Sheriff Taylor and Judge Wilson, bringing the letter as evidence of O'Malley's threats and manipulation. The judge, a pragmatic man with little patience for bullies regardless of their social standing, was particularly incensed by the banker's tactics. This letter alone shows questionable character, Judge Wilson declared after reading it, treating a wife as property to be retrieved disgraceful. Mrs. O'Malley has physical scars to match the emotional ones, Sam added, careful to maintain a respectful tone despite his anger. Dr. Miller can confirm the extent of her injuries when she arrived. Sheriff Taylor leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Problem is, without witnesses to the actual abuse, it's still her word against his in a court, and he's got that whole mentally unstable story working for him. Which is why I'm documenting everything now, Sam replied, building a case before he arrives. You think he will? The judge asked. Come himself, I mean. I'm sure of it, Sam said grimly. A man like that can't stand being defied, especially not by his wife. The sheriff nodded slowly. I'll keep an eye out, but Norwood, if he does come, let the law handle it. Don't take matters into your own hands. Sam met the sheriff's gaze steadily. I won't start anything, but I will protect Katherine if it comes to that. On the ride back to the ranch, Sam considered his next move. The meeting had gone as well as could be expected. Both men were now aware of the situation and inclined to be sympathetic to Katherine's plight. But legal protections for wives were limited, and if O'Malley came with lawyers and doctors willing to testify to Katherine's supposed instability, the situation could become complicated quickly. As he approached the ranch, he spotted Katherine in the vegetable garden, gathering the last of the late autumn squash before the hard freeze that was forecast for the coming night. She looked up at the sound of his horse, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. The sight of her, so natural and at ease on his land, cemented Sam's resolve. Whatever it took, he would ensure she never had to return to a life of fear and pain. How did it go? She asked as he dismounted and tied his horse to the fence. Better than expected, Sam replied, joining her in the garden. Judge Wilson was particularly sympathetic, said the letter showed O'Malley's true character. Katherine nodded, relief evident in her expression. That's something, at least. She hesitated, then asked, Did you see Mr. Callahan in town? Briefly, at the hotel. He didn't look pleased to see me. Sam picked up the basket of squash, hefting it easily. I wrote my response and left it with him. Made it very clear you're here of your own free will and under the protection of this entire community. What do you think Thomas will do when he receives it? Katherine asked, falling into step beside Sam as they walked toward the house. If I were to guess, he'll be on the next train to as close as he can get, then hire a coach the rest of the way, Sam predicted. A man like that can't stand being refused, Katherine's steps faltered. I'm afraid, Sam, not for myself, but for you, for everyone here. Thomas doesn't fight fair and he doesn't fight alone. Sam set down the basket and turned to face her fully. Katherine, look at me. When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, I understand your fear, but you're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. I couldn't bear it if someone got hurt because of me, Katherine whispered, her voice catching. The only person responsible for what Thomas does is Thomas, Sam said firmly. Not you, never you. In that moment, With the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard and the promise of frost in the air, something shifted between them. Katherine stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and Sam found himself drawing her into his arms. She came willingly, resting her head against his chest as his arms encircled her. "I've spent so long being afraid," she murmured against his shirt, "so long believing I deserved what happened to me." "You never deserved any of it," Sam replied, his voice rough with emotion. Not for a single moment. They stood like that, holding each other in the gathering dusk, until Mrs. Dempsey's call for supper reluctantly drew them apart. But something fundamental had changed, a barrier broken, a connection deepened. That night, the predicted frost arrived, silver white and glittering in the moonlight. Katherine stood at her bedroom window, watching it transform the landscape into something magical and new. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like something to dread, but something that might, against all odds, hold promise. Thomas O'Malley arrived in Custer exactly 6 days after his letter, just as Sam had predicted. He came not on horseback, but in a hired carriage, accompanied by 2 men, one clearly a lawyer with his briefcase and pinstriped suit, the other larger and rougher, with the watchful eyes of hired muscle. They made quite a spectacle as they pulled up outside the sheriff's office, drawing the attention of everyone on the main street. Thomas emerged first, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and influence. He was handsome in the conventional way of successful men, with carefully styled dark hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. But his eyes were cold, assessing the town with barely disguised contempt. Sheriff Taylor stepped onto the boardwalk, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Thomas straightened his jacket before approaching. "Thomas O'Malley, Rapid City Banking and Trust. I believe you've received communication regarding my wife's situation." "I've heard a few things," the sheriff acknowledged neutrally. "What brings you to Custer, Mr. O'Malley?" "I've come to retrieve Katherine and return her to proper medical care," Thomas replied smoothly. "Her condition requires specialized treatment." "That's so." The sheriff's expression remained impassive. "Your wife seems in fine health to me. Been seeing her in church regular these past few weeks." A muscle ticked in Thomas's jaw, the only sign that the sheriff's casual mention of Katherine's public appearances had struck a nerve. "Then you understand my concern, Sheriff. My wife's delusions often manifest as periods of apparent normalcy before deteriorating rapidly." "Well now, I'm no doctor," Sheriff Taylor drawled, "but Judge Wilson has taken quite an interest in your wife's case. Perhaps you should speak with him before making any hasty decisions." Thomas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be happy to meet with the local judiciary. But first, I'd like to know where my wife is currently staying." The sheriff scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Don't know that it's my place to say, considering the circumstances of her arrival." "The circumstances," Thomas repeated, his voice hardening, "were that my mentally unstable wife fled proper medical care and has apparently been harbored by persons unknown in violation of both law and decency." "That's one version," Sheriff Taylor agreed mildly. "There are others." Before Thomas could respond, Sam's wagon appeared at the end of the street with Katherine seated beside him. They had come to town for supplies, unaware that Thomas had arrived. Katherine spotted her husband first, her body going rigid with shock. Sam followed her gaze, his hand instinctively moving to cover hers on the seat between them. "He's here," Katherine whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Sam, he's here." "I see him," Sam replied, keeping his tone steady despite the surge of protective anger that rose within him. "Remember what we discussed. You don't have to face him alone." Katherine took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I know, we do this together." Sam guided the wagon toward the general store, deliberately passing the sheriff's office where Thomas stood watching their approach with narrowed eyes. As they drew level, Sam nodded a greeting to the sheriff but otherwise gave no indication of stopping. "Katherine." Thomas called out, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Stop this nonsense at once." Sam felt Katherine flinch beside him but kept the wagon moving steadily forward until they reached the general store. Only then did he bring the horses to a halt, jumping down before turning to help Katherine descend. "You don't have to do this now," he murmured, his hands steady at her waist. "We can turn around and head back to the ranch." Katherine shook her head, though her face had gone pale. "No. Running only gives him power. I need to face him." Sam nodded, respecting her decision even as concern tightened his chest. "I'm right beside you." Together, they walked into the general store, where Mrs. Peterson greeted them warmly. They had barely begun their shopping when the bell above the door jingled, and Thomas entered, followed by his lawyer. The hired muscle remained outside, watching through the window. "Katherine," Thomas said, his voice softening to a tone of practiced concern. "My dear, I've been so worried about you." Katherine turned slowly to face her husband, her hand finding Sam's beside her. "Hello, Thomas?" Thomas's gaze dropped to their joined hands, his expression darkening momentarily before smoothing into solicitous worry. "You've had everyone so concerned, disappearing like that. The doctors said the strain of losing the baby might have affected your mind, but I never imagined you'd flee all the way to this place." The calculated cruelty of the statement, the casual mention of the baby she had lost after one of Thomas's beatings, nearly brought Katherine to her knees. Sam felt her sway beside him and tightened his grip on her hand. "There's nothing wrong with my mind," Katherine replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "And we both know what really happened to our child." Thomas's eyes hardened, though his concerned expression never wavered. "You see, Mr. Jensen," he said to his lawyer, "these delusions about abuse. The doctors warned me she might fixate on such fantasies." "The only fantasy," Sam interjected, his voice level despite the anger coursing through him, "is that you're a concerned husband rather than a man who beats his wife." Thomas turned his attention to Sam, assessing him with cold calculation. "You must be Norwood, the rancher who's been harboring my wife." "She came here of her own free will," Sam replied, "and she'll stay or go as she chooses." "A noble sentiment," Thomas said with a thin smile, "but legally incorrect. As her husband, I have every right to insist on her return, particularly given her documented mental instability." "Documented by doctors on your payroll, no doubt," Sam countered. Mrs. Peterson had abandoned any pretense of sorting inventory, watching the confrontation with undisguised interest along with the few other customers in the store. "This is hardly the venue for such a discussion," Thomas said, glancing distastefully at their audience. "Katherine, gather your things. We're returning to Rapid City today." "No," the word was quiet but firm, and it came from Katherine. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Thomas." Thomas's facade of concern cracked slightly, irritation flashing across his features. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you are. This adventure has gone on quite long enough." "The only thing that's gone on too long," Katherine replied, her voice gaining strength, "is my marriage to a man who treats me as property rather than a person." A hush fell over the store as everyone absorbed the direct confrontation. Thomas's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, the door opened again and Sheriff Taylor entered, followed by Judge Wilson. "Thought I might find you all here," the sheriff said casually. "Mr. O'Malley, I believe Judge Wilson would like a word." The judge, a formidable man in his 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense justice, stepped forward. "Mr. O'Malley, I've reviewed the correspondence between you and Mr. Norwood, as well as Dr. Miller's report on your wife's injuries when she arrived in our town. I find the situation troubling." Thomas recovered quickly, extending a hand to the judge. "Judge Wilson, I appreciate your concern, but I assure you my wife's injuries were self-inflicted during a period of distress following her miscarriage. The doctors in Rapid City have extensive documentation of her condition." "I'm sure they do," Judge Wilson replied dryly, ignoring the offered hand. "However, I've seen enough cases of female hysteria diagnosed conveniently when a woman displays independence to be skeptical of such claims." Katherine stepped forward, her chin raised despite the trembling Sam could feel through their still joined hands. "Judge Wilson, I left my husband because he nearly killed me. The baby I lost was due to his violence, not any accident or illness." I have endured years of abuse at his hands, isolated from friends and family who might have helped me." "She's obviously delusional," Thomas interrupted, his mask of concern slipping further. "This man," he gestured dismissively at Sam, "has clearly taken advantage of her vulnerable state for his own purposes." "The only person taking advantage of anyone," Sam said evenly, "is you, O'Malley. Using your influence and money to control and abuse your wife, then label her insane when she finally escapes." The confrontation might have escalated further, but Judge Wilson raised a hand for silence. "Enough, this is becoming a public spectacle which serves no one." He turned to Katherine. "Mrs. O'Malley, in light of the conflicting claims, I believe a neutral evaluation is in order. Would you be willing to speak with me privately about these matters, and perhaps undergo an examination by Dr. Miller with a female attendant present, of course?" Katherine nodded. "I have nothing to hide, Your Honor." "Very well." The judge turned to Thomas. "Mr. O'Malley, I must ask that you refrain from any attempts to remove your wife from this jurisdiction until this matter is resolved. Should you do so, I will issue a warrant for your arrest on charges of kidnapping." Thomas's lawyer stepped forward. "Judge Wilson, with all due respect, a husband cannot legally kidnap his own wife. She is, by law, under his protection and authority. The law also recognizes that protection does not extend to physical harm," the judge countered. "And while the legal standing is complex, I assure you I can make this process extremely uncomfortable for your client should he choose to defy my directive." A tense silence followed as Thomas visibly weighed his options. Finally, he inclined his head in a gesture of reluctant acquiescence. "Very well, Your Honor. I will comply with your request, trusting that a fair evaluation will confirm my concerns about my wife's condition." "See that you do," Judge Wilson replied firmly. "Sheriff Taylor will be keeping a close eye on your movements while you're in our town." He turned to Katherine and Sam. "Mrs. O'Malley, would tomorrow morning at 9 be convenient for our discussion?" "Yes, Your Honor," Katherine agreed, relief evident in her voice. "Good. And Mr. Norwood, I trust you'll ensure her safe transport to and from my office?" Sam nodded. "Of course, Your Honor." With that, the judge departed, followed by Sheriff Taylor, who paused at the door to give Thomas a pointed look of warning. Thomas and his lawyer exited next, leaving Sam and Katherine standing amid the curious stares of the store's other patrons. Mrs. Peterson broke the awkward silence. "Well, that was more exciting than quilting circle. Now, what supplies did you folks come in for?" Her matter-of-fact question dispelled some of the tension, and Katherine managed a shaky smile. "Flour and coffee to start." As they completed their shopping, Sam kept a protective eye on the street outside, half expecting Thomas to linger. But the banker and his companions had apparently retreated to the hotel, at least for now. "Are you all right?" Sam asked softly as they loaded their purchases into the wagon. Katherine nodded, though her hands still trembled slightly. "Better than I expected to be. Seeing him again was—" She trailed off, searching for words. "Terrifying," Sam suggested gently. "Yes, but also clarifying." Katherine looked up at him, her eyes clearer than he'd ever seen them. "I thought I might crumble when I saw him, that all the strength I've found here would disappear, but it didn't. I'm still standing." Sam felt a surge of pride and something deeper, warmer. "You did more than stand. You spoke your truth, Katherine. That takes real courage." The ride back to the ranch was quieter than usual, both lost in thoughts of what the next days might bring. The confrontation with Thomas had been inevitable, but its outcome remained uncertain. Judge Wilson's intervention had bought them time, but whether it would lead to Katherine's freedom was far from guaranteed. As they approached the ranch, Katherine broke the silence. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Sam, thank you for everything." Sam glanced at her, taking in her profile against the setting sun. "Don't thank me yet, we still have a fight ahead of us." "I know," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily, "but for the first time, I believe it's a fight we might actually win." The simple "we" in her statement warmed Sam more than any declaration could have. They were in this together now, facing Thomas O'Malley not as victim and protector, but as allies, perhaps even as partners. As they pulled into the ranch yard, Mrs. Dempsey emerged from the house, her expression curious. "You two are back early. Everything all right in town?" Sam and Katherine exchanged glances before Sam answered. "Thomas O'Malley arrived today. There was a confrontation at the general store." Mrs. Dempsey's eyes widened. "Lord have mercy." "Are you hurt, dear?" she asked Katherine. "Only my pride," Katherine assured her with a small smile. "Judge Wilson intervened. I'm to speak with him tomorrow morning." "Well, that's something at least," Mrs. Dempsey said, helping unload the supplies. "That man's a fair judge if ever there was one." That evening after dinner, Sam found Katherine on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, pinpricks of light in the vast expanse above. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, pausing at the door. Katherine shook her head, making room for him on the bench. "I was just thinking about tomorrow, about what I'll say to the judge." Sam settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Just tell him the truth, the whole truth, as hard as it might be. Some of it is difficult to speak about," Katherine admitted, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Things Thomas did that I've never told anyone." Sam's hands tightened on his knees, but his voice remained gentle. "Whatever you can share will help your case, but you don't owe anyone your pain, Katherine. Not even for justice." She turned to look at him then, her face pale in the starlight. "How did you become so wise, Sam Norwood?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "Not wisdom. Just hard-earned lessons about carrying burdens alone when you don't have to." Katherine's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers cool against his palm. "I'm not alone anymore. That's what frightens Thomas the most, I think, that I've found people who see me really see me and stand with me anyway." "You're right about that," Sam agreed, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Men like him rely on isolation to maintain control." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as more stars emerged above them. The night was clear and still, with only the distant howl of a coyote breaking the quiet. "Sam," Katherine said eventually, her voice barely above a whisper, "if the judge rules in my favor, if I'm truly free of Thomas, what happens then?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Sam turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the dim light from the house windows. "Whatever you want to happen," he replied honestly. "You could go to your brother in St. Louis or start fresh somewhere else entirely." Or, Katherine prompted when he hesitated, "Or you could stay," Sam said simply, "here with me." The words were out before he could reconsider them, direct and unadorned. He hadn't planned to speak so plainly, not with Katherine's future still uncertain, but the events of the day had clarified his own feelings beyond doubt. Katherine's breath caught, her eyes searching his face. "Sam, I don't know if I can be what you deserve. I'm still broken in so many ways." "I'm damaged beyond repair," Katherine whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside her. "No amount of healing will change that." Sam was quiet for so long that Katherine thought he might agree with her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and sure. "Then we'll heal together," he said simply. "Piece by piece, day by day." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, but for once they weren't tears of sorrow or fear. "You really believe that's possible?" "I do," Sam replied, reaching up to gently brush a tear from her cheek. "I believe in you, Katherine, in your strength, in your heart, and I believe in us if you're willing to try." In answer, Katherine leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a kiss as gentle as a promise, as fragile as hope, but real all the same. Sam responded with equal tenderness, his hand cradling her face as if she were something infinitely precious. When they finally parted, Katherine rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed as she absorbed the moment, the safety of his touch, the warmth of his nearness, the possibility of a future where love didn't hurt. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "know that you've already given me more than I ever thought possible. You've given me hope." Sam held her close under the star-filled sky, making a silent vow that no matter what Thomas O'Malley might try, Katherine would never again have to face her battles alone. Morning came too quickly, the eastern sky blushing pink as Sam and Katherine prepared for their meeting with Judge Wilson. Katherine wore her best dress, the forest green one from their church appearance, and had arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style that framed her face and emphasized the quiet dignity she carried despite her nervousness. "You look beautiful," Sam said as she descended the stairs to the main room where he waited. Katherine smoothed her skirts, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you, I want to make a good impression." "You will," Sam assured her, offering his arm. "Ready?" she nodded, taking a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." The ride into town was tense, but not uncomfortably so. They drew strength from each other's presence, from the quiet understanding that had grown between them over the past weeks, and from the kiss they had shared beneath the stars, a promise of possibilities if today went well. Custer was already bustling with morning activity as they arrived, shopkeepers sweeping boardwalks and ranchers bringing supplies for the day ahead. More than a few curious glances followed them as they made their way to Judge Wilson's office, news of yesterday's confrontation having spread through the small community with predictable speed. The judge received them in his chambers, a wood-paneled room lined with law books and warmed by a small stove in the corner. He greeted them with formal courtesy, indicating chairs before his desk. "Mrs. O'Malley, thank you for coming," he began, folding his hands on the polished surface before him. "I hope to speak with you privately if Mr. Norwood has no objection to waiting outside." Sam looked to Katherine, who nodded her agreement. "I'll be right outside if you need me," he assured her before taking his leave. Alone with the judge, Katherine straightened her shoulders, prepared to tell her story, yet again the parts she could bear to share, at least. "Mrs. O'Malley," Judge Wilson began, his tone gentler than his formal bearing might suggest, "I want you to know that nothing you say here will leave this room unless you wish it to. My concern is for justice and your well-being, not for social niceties or appearances." Relief washed over Katherine at his words. "Thank you, Your Honor. Now," he continued, "I'd like you to tell me in your own words why you fled your husband's home in Rapid City." Katherine took a steadying breath, then began her account the early days of her marriage when Thomas had seemed the perfect husband, the gradual isolation from friends and family. The first time he struck her after a dinner party where she had embarrassed him by speaking too freely with another man. She described how the violence escalated over time, becoming more frequent and severe, always followed by passionate apologies and promises to change that never lasted. She spoke of the pregnancy that had briefly brought her hope, and the argument that had ended with her falling down the stairs, losing both the child and any remaining illusion that Thomas might improve. She explained her failed attempts to seek help, how Thomas's position and charm had always won over potential allies, leaving her more isolated than before. Finally, she described the beating that had driven her to flee 3 days of terror after she had discovered Thomas was embezzling from his own bank to cover gambling debts, a discovery he couldn't allow her to share. "I knew he would kill me eventually," she concluded, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "It was only a matter of time, so I took what little money I had hidden away and ran. I had nowhere specific in mind, just away from Rapid City, where his influence couldn't reach." Throughout her account, Judge Wilson had listened intently, occasionally making notes but mostly observing her with keen eyes that missed nothing. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, his expression troubled. "Mrs. O'Malley, have you shared these allegations of embezzlement with anyone else, particularly the banking authorities?" Katherine shook her head. "No, Your Honor, I was too focused on escaping with my life." "Understandable," he nodded. "And you said you had evidence of this financial impropriety." "I saw the ledgers," Katherine confirmed. "Thomas didn't realize I understood banking well enough to recognize the discrepancies. My father was a banker before he passed, and he taught me the basics of the business." Judge Wilson made another note before continuing. "Mrs. O'Malley, your husband has presented affidavits from 2 physicians in Rapid City attesting to your mental instability following your miscarriage. He claims you became paranoid, fabricating stories of abuse and financial misconduct as part of a delusional pattern." Katherine's hands tightened in her lap, but her voice remained steady. Those physicians are Thomas's golf partners and social acquaintances. They examined me exactly once in Thomas's presence, after he had kept me isolated and drugged with laudanum for 3 days following a particularly severe beating. Of course I appeared confused and distressed. I see. The judge made another note. And your relationship with Mr. Norwood. Your husband alleges impropriety. A faint blush colored Catherine's cheeks. Sam, Mr. Norwood has been nothing but respectful and kind. He offered shelter when I had nowhere else to go, protection when I was vulnerable, and friendship when I needed it most. She hesitated, then added honestly, if there are deeper feelings developing between us, they have never been acted upon inappropriately, and they began only after I had left a marriage that existed in name only. Judge Wilson studied her for a moment longer, then set down his pen. Thank you for your candor, Mrs. O'Malley. I would like to speak with Dr. Miller briefly about your physical condition when you arrived, and then with your husband. After that, I'll make my determination regarding this matter. Katherine nodded, rising from her chair. Thank you for listening, Your Honor. Few have been willing to do so. Justice requires hearing all sides, Mrs. O'Malley, even perhaps especially those society prefers to silence. Sam was waiting anxiously in the outer office, rising immediately when Katherine emerged. How did it go? He asked quietly as she approached. As well as could be expected, she replied. He listened, truly listened. That's more than most have done. Dr. Miller arrived shortly thereafter, nodding a greeting to them both before entering the judge's chambers. His examination was relatively brief, and when he emerged, he gave Katherine an encouraging smile. Just told him the facts, my dear. The injuries I treated spoke for themselves. Thomas arrived next, immaculately dressed and projecting confidence as he strode into the outer office. He barely glanced at Katherine and Sam, his attention focused on making an impression on the judge's clerk. Mr. O'Malley, the clerk announced, Judge Wilson will see you now. Thomas straightened his already perfect tie and entered the chambers, his lawyer following close behind. The door closed with a finality that left Katherine and Sam in tense silence, waiting for a decision that could determine the course of their future. Whatever happens, Sam said softly, taking her hand, we'll face it together. Katherine squeezed his hand gratefully. I know. The wait stretched longer than expected, nearly 2 hours passing before the door to Judge Wilson's chambers finally opened. Thomas emerged first, his expression thunderous despite his attempt to maintain composure. His lawyer followed, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Last came Judge Wilson himself, his face impassive as he addressed the waiting group. I've heard all parties in this matter and reviewed the available evidence, he began formally. This is not a formal trial, merely a preliminary determination to guide further action. He turned to Katherine. Mrs. O'Malley, based on Dr. Miller's testimony and my own assessment, I find no evidence of the mental instability your husband alleges. You appear rational, coherent, and entirely capable of making your own decisions regarding your safety and well-being. Relief washed over Katherine in a dizzying wave. Beside her, Sam's hand tightened around hers. Furthermore, the judge continued, turning to Thomas, I find Mrs. O'Malley's account of physical abuse credible and supported by medical evidence. Mr. O'Malley, while I cannot issue formal charges based solely on testimony without witnesses, I am issuing a protection order forbidding you from approaching your wife or attempting to remove her from this jurisdiction. Thomas's face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. You have no authority to separate a man from his lawful wife based on hysterical accusations. I have every authority to protect citizens from credible threats of violence, Judge Wilson replied sternly, and Mrs. O'Malley's allegations of financial impropriety at your bank raise serious questions that I am obligated to report to the territorial banking authorities for investigation. The color drained from Thomas's face at those words. What allegations? What lies has she been spreading now? That, Judge Wilson said coldly, is for the Banking Commission to determine. I suggest you return to Rapid City immediately to address these concerns. Sheriff Taylor will escort you and your associates to the stage depot to ensure your prompt departure. As if summoned by his name, Sheriff Taylor appeared at the office door, his expression making it clear he'd heard enough to understand the situation. "Mr. O'Malley," the sheriff said, gesturing toward the exit, "your carriage is waiting." For a moment, it seemed Thomas might refuse to leave, might make a scene or even attempt to approach Katherine. But with the sheriff watching closely and his own lawyer urging compliance with meaningful glances, Thomas finally turned toward the door. "This isn't over, Katherine," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You've embarrassed me for the last time." "On the contrary, Mr. O'Malley," Sam interjected, rising to stand protectively beside Katherine, "it is very much over. Any further threats against Katherine will be taken as threats against me personally, and I promise you won't enjoy the consequences." The two men locked eyes in a silent battle of wills until Thomas finally looked away, his defeat in this moment clear to everyone present. "Get your things," he snapped at his lawyer. "We're leaving this backwater hellhole." After they had gone, escorted by the determined sheriff, Judge Wilson turned back to Katherine and Sam. "Mrs. O'Malley, the protection order will remain in effect indefinitely. I've also taken the liberty of writing to the district court judge in Rapid City, outlining the circumstances and recommending consideration should you pursue divorce proceedings." Katherine's eyes widened in surprise. "Divorce, Your Honor." "I didn't think it would be possible, given the circumstances. Difficult certainly, but not impossible, particularly if the Banking Commission's investigation supports your claims of financial misconduct. A man facing embezzlement charges has little moral standing to contest a divorce, regardless of traditional expectations." Hope, fragile but real, blossomed in Katherine's chest. "Thank you, Your Honor, for everything." "Don't thank me, Mrs. O'Malley. I've simply done my duty." The judge's stern expression softened slightly. "Though I admit, it's been a particularly satisfying duty in this case." As they left the judge's office, stepping into the bright autumn sunshine, Katherine felt lighter than she had in years, as if an immense weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't completely free yet, but for the first time that freedom seemed possible rather than a desperate dream. "What are you thinking?" Sam asked as they walked toward the wagon, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Katherine looked up at him, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "I'm thinking that I might have a future after all, one that I choose for myself." Sam's answering smile warmed her more than the autumn sun above. "Any particular plans for that future?" "A few," she replied, her eyes never leaving his, "but they all start right here." The weeks that followed brought changes both subtle and profound. True to Judge Wilson's word, an investigation was launched into Thomas's banking practices, revealing irregularities that quickly expanded into a full-scale fraud inquiry. Within a month, Thomas O'Malley was facing criminal charges that made his marital problems seem insignificant by comparison. The news reached Custer via telegram, brought personally to the ranch by Sheriff Taylor, who couldn't quite suppress his satisfaction as he delivered it. "Thought you'd want to know right away," he told Katherine. "Your husband's been arrested." Banking Commission found nearly $50,000 missing, with evidence pointing straight to him. Katherine received the news with complex emotions, vindication mixed with a lingering sadness for the man she had once believed Thomas to be. "What happens now?" "Trial, most likely," the sheriff replied. "Given the amount involved in the breach of public trust, he's looking at serious prison time." The implications sank in slowly. Thomas in prison meant Thomas unable to contest a divorce. It meant freedom, real, legal freedom within reach at last. "There's more," Sheriff Taylor added, producing an official-looking letter. "This came for you with instructions to deliver it personally from the district court in Rapid City." With slightly trembling fingers, Katherine opened the letter. As she read its contents, tears filled her eyes. "Katherine?" Sam asked anxiously, moving to her side. "What is it?" The judge in Rapid City, she managed through her tears. "He's granted my petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and abandonment. With Thomas facing criminal charges and unable to appear, the court expedited the process." She looked up at Sam, wonder in her eyes. I'm free, Sam, legally free. The news spread quickly through the ranch and into town beyond. Well-wishers stopped by with small gifts and congratulations, the community that had embraced Katherine now celebrating her liberation. Mrs. Dempsey baked a special cake for dinner, and Jim Thompson broke out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. But amidst the celebrations, Katherine found herself seeking quiet moments to absorb the magnitude of the change in her circumstances. She had come to Custer broken and desperate, expecting at best a temporary refuge before Thomas inevitably reclaimed her. Now, less than 3 months later, she was a free woman with possibilities stretching before her like the vast Dakota Prairie. The most tantalizing of those possibilities involved the man who had made it all possible, Sam Norwood, whose steady presence had become the cornerstone of her rebuilding life. Since their kiss on the porch, there had been other moments of tenderness between them, but both had been cautious, aware of the legal complications that could arise from appearing too close while she was still married. Now, with that barrier removed, Katherine found herself both thrilled and terrified by the potential for something deeper. Did she even remember how to love properly? Could she trust herself, let alone someone else, after everything Thomas had done to destroy her faith in such things? She was pondering these questions one evening in late November as she sat by the fire, a book open but unread in her lap. Outside, the first serious snowfall of winter was blanketing the ranch in pristine white, transforming the landscape into something magical and new. Sam found her there, pausing in the doorway to observe her quiet contemplation before making his presence known. "Penny for your thoughts," Katherine looked up with a smile, closing her book. "They might not be worth that much." "I doubt that," Sam replied, settling into the chair beside hers. "You've been quiet since the news came, having second thoughts about staying in Custer." The question caught her off guard. "Not at all. Why would you think that?" Sam shrugged, his gaze focused on the dancing flames. "You're free now, free to go anywhere, do anything. Your brother's been asking when you'll visit him in St. Louis." "He has," Katherine acknowledged. Michael's reply to her letter had come weeks ago, pages of relief and love and offers to help her start a new life in Missouri. "But I'm not ready to leave Custer yet." "Yet," Sam repeated, the single word carrying a weight of uncertainty. Katherine studied his profile in the firelight, suddenly understanding his reticence over the past days. "Sam, look at me." When he turned toward her, she saw the vulnerability he usually kept carefully hidden, the fear of loss that had haunted him since Caroline's death, reawakened now by the possibility of Katherine's departure. "I have no plans to leave," she said softly. "Not Custer, and certainly not you." Hope flickered in his eyes, but caution tempered it. "You have a whole life ahead of you now, Katherine. You should explore all your options before making decisions." "I have explored my options," she replied with gentle firmness, "and I've made my decision." She reached across the space between them, taking his hand in hers. "My place is here if you'll have me." Sam's hand tightened around hers, his voice rough with emotion when he spoke. "If I'll have you." "Katherine, I've been falling in love with you since the moment you opened your eyes in Doc Miller's office and still had the courage to be suspicious of me." A startled laugh escaped her at the unexpected declaration. "That's when it started for you, when I was at my absolute worst." "That's when I saw your strength," Sam corrected, moving from his chair to kneel before her, still holding her hand. "And I've seen it every day since in your kindness to Mrs. Dempsey when you were still healing, in your determination to learn riding despite your fear, in the way you faced down Thomas without flinching." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of a joy so intense it bordered on pain. "I never thought I'd feel this way again, safe enough to love, brave enough to trust. You gave me that, Sam." "We gave it to each other," he replied, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. "Like I said that night on the porch, we heal together, piece by piece, day by day." "And we have," Katherine agreed, covering his hand with hers. "I'm not the same broken woman who collapsed at the edge of town, and you're not the same lonely rancher who found her." Sam nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "So where do we go from here, Katherine O'Malley?" In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them with a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, tender but not tentative, passionate but not desperate. A meeting of equals who had found in each other exactly what they needed to be whole. When they parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marry me, not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. Build a life with me here." "Yes," Katherine replied without hesitation, the word feeling like coming home. Yes to all of it. The winter that followed was the happiest of Katherine's life. She and Sam courted properly, with sleigh rides under starlit skies, Sunday dinners with friends from town, and quiet evenings by the fire planning their future together. The ranch became truly her home as she took on more responsibilities, applying her banking knowledge to the business side of operations while learning the practical aspects of ranch life from Sam, Mrs. Dempsey, and the Hands. They were married on the first day of spring, 1877, in a simple ceremony at the church in Custer. Katherine wore a dress of pale blue silk ordered specially from Denver, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Sam stood tall in a new suit, his face alight with a joy that many in town had feared they'd never see again after Caroline's death. Judge Wilson officiated, adding a personal note to the traditional service. What stands before us today is not merely a union of two people, but a testament to the healing power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Samuel and Katherine have found in each other not just partnership, but redemption, proof that even hearts that believe themselves broken beyond repair can find wholeness again in the right hands. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as they spoke their vows, promising to cherish and protect each other through whatever challenges life might bring. And when Sam kissed his bride as the spring sunshine streamed through the windows, it felt to both like the culmination of a journey neither had expected to make, but both were profoundly grateful to have shared. The celebration afterwards spilled from the church to the hotel restaurant and into the street beyond, the entire town joining in the festivities. Katherine danced with Sam, with Sheriff Taylor, with Dr. Miller, and finally with her brother Michael, who had traveled from St. Louis for the occasion. "You look happy, Kitty," Michael said, using the childhood nickname she hadn't heard in years. "Truly happy." "I am," she confirmed, glancing across the room to where Sam stood chatting with Judge Wilson, his eyes finding hers every few moments as if to reassure himself she was still there. "Happier than I ever thought possible after Thomas. Norwood's a good man," Michael acknowledged. "I wasn't sure at first, getting your letter about a rancher who'd taken you in, but seeing you two together, it's clear he adores you." "The feeling is mutual," Katherine said softly. "Then I'm satisfied." Michael squeezed her hand as the dance ended. "But remember, there's always a place for you both in St. Louis if Dakota Territory ever loses its charm." Katherine laughed, linking her arm through his as they walked back to where Sam waited. "I appreciate the offer, but I think we've found our home here. The land gets under your skin after a while." "So I'm discovering," Michael replied with a mock shudder. "All this open space makes a city man nervous. Give me buildings and crowds any day." Sam greeted them with a warm smile, his hand automatically finding Katherine's as she reached his side. "Enjoying the dancing, Michael. Indeed, though your wife is kind enough not to mention my lack of rhythm." Michael raised his glass in a small toast. "To both of you may your life together be long and filled with the joy you deserve." "I'll drink to that," Sam agreed, his eyes meeting Katherine's with a promise that needed no words to be understood. As the celebration continued around them, Katherine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the desperate flight from Rapid City to the healing embrace of Custer and its people. From the brokenness she had carried to the strength she had discovered. From the woman who believed herself damaged beyond repair to the woman who stood now, whole and cherished, beside the man who had helped her find her way back to herself. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Norwood?" Sam asked quietly, noting her contemplative expression. The new name, her chosen name, brought a smile to her lips. "About beginnings and endings. How what I thought was the end of my life was actually just the beginning of something better than I could have imagined. Sam's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. And this is just the start. We have a lifetime of beginnings ahead of us. A lifetime, Katherine repeated, letting the promise of those words settle into her heart. I like the sound of that. 5 years later, the Norwood Ranch had nearly doubled in size and prosperity. New buildings had been added, the cattle herd expanded, and the main house renovated to accommodate the family that now filled it with life and laughter. Katherine stood on the front porch, watching as Sam gave their 4-year-old son, Joseph, his first riding lesson on a gentle pony in the corral. The boy's excited squeals carried across the yard, accompanied by Sam's patient instructions and encouragement. Beside her, 2-year-old Emma clutched at her skirts, thumb firmly in her mouth as she observed her brother's adventure with wide, contemplative eyes so like her father's. "Mama, Joe riding," Emma announced unnecessarily, pointing with her free hand. "Yes, he is, sweetheart," Katherine agreed, smoothing her daughter's unruly curls, "just like Papa taught him." From inside the house came the sound of Mrs. Dempsey singing as she prepared lunch, the familiar melody blending with the everyday sounds of the ranch horses nickering in the barn, cattle lowing in the distant pasture, men calling to each other as they worked. It was a good life, built day by day from the ashes of what had come before. There were still moments when the shadows of the past threatened nightmares that woke Katherine gasping for breath, flinches at unexpected movements, days when the weight of old memories made her quieter than usual. But Sam understood, just as she understood his occasional bouts of melancholy on Caroline's birthday or the anniversary of her death. They healed together, as promised. Not perfectly, not completely, some scars would always remain, but enough. Enough to find joy in each day, to build a family founded on respect and tenderness, to face whatever challenges arose with the certainty that they were stronger together than apart. In the corral, Joseph had completed his circuit on the pony and was beaming with pride as Sam lifted him from the saddle, setting him on his shoulders for a victory lap around the enclosure. "Mama, look, I want ride too." Emma tugged at Katherine's skirt, her earlier caution forgotten in the face of her brother's success. "When you're a little bigger, sweetheart," Katherine promised, lifting the girl into her arms. "For now, let's go tell Papa and Joseph that lunch is almost ready." As they crossed the yard toward the corral, Sam looked up and saw them coming, his face breaking into the smile that still made Katherine's heart skip after all these years. He said something to Joseph, then jogged toward them, the boy bouncing on his shoulders with delight. "Did you see me, Mama?" "Did you see me riding?" Joseph called excitedly. "I certainly did," Katherine replied, pride warming her voice. "You're a natural, just like your papa." Sam reached them, leaning in to kiss Katherine briefly before taking Emma from her arms. "What do you think, Princess?" "Ready for your turn on Lightning?" Emma's eyes widened at the pony's name, uncertainty warring with desire on her small face. "Maybe tomorrow," she decided gravely, making both her parents laugh. A wise decision, Sam agreed, settling her on his other shoulder so that he carried both children. Tomorrow is soon enough for new adventures. Katherine walked beside them back to the house, contentment settling over her like a favorite blanket. This was her life now, not perfect, not without challenges, but built on a foundation of love so strong that even the hardest days couldn't shake it. As they reached the porch, Sam set the children down, sending them inside to wash up for lunch while he and Katherine lingered in the autumn sunshine. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, echoing the question that had become a familiar refrain between them. Katherine smiled up at him, reaching to brush a strand of hair now threaded with silver at the temples from his forehead. "I was thinking how fortunate I am, how far we've come since that day I collapsed at the edge of town." Sam's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "You never did give up, even when you thought you were broken beyond repair." "Neither did you," she replied softly. "You kept your promise, we healed together." "And we keep healing every day," Sam agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "That's the miracle of it." From inside came the sound of children laughing, of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Katherine stretched up to kiss her husband once more before they went in to join their family, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them here to this place, this moment, this love that had saved them both. Not broken beyond repair after all, but made stronger at the broken places, whole and healed in all the ways that mattered most.